So next up, I'm very excited to talk to Amy. Amy is the CEO of People Matter, and she is a business psychologist and has a lot of experience, or she's working with burnout and has a personal history which she might also share a little bit of, and decided to make that her mission to work with burnout. Welcome, Amy.
I'm obviously very passionate about, and happy to share as much as I can, both from my own personal experience, also in what we do at People Matter to help solve it, but also I'm a business psychologist, so I've kind of got a few angles on this topic, and it's something that we all hear about, but actually really connecting with what do we really mean by it, how does it develop, why is it important, particularly I think in the founder startup community, for your own culture, for yourself. Thank you for having me, and it's great to be able to talk about this really very important topic. Thank you.
Really great. Before we start, just for everybody in the that is also listening now, everybody in the community, there is a Q&A below. We have half an hour now to talk about this. I want to incorporate as many questions that you have here. Main topics are going to be burnout, mental health, these kind of things. You can post completely anonymously. We're just trying to help, trying to answer, or Amy is hopefully trying to answer or answering most of them. Amy, what is your story, and why is this topic of burnout, mental health so important to you?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to know where to start because it's a big topic, and there's a lot that can be said about it. And everyone has their own version of it. Even if you've been through burnout, there's always personal circumstances and different things that happen in and around why it happens, but there are lots of commonalities around the reasons why someone might become burnt out, and what the typical symptoms are and what the impact of that is. And for me personally, in terms of where this all started, I launched into my career as a business psychologist. I am absolutely passionate about how do we apply psychology to the real world, to help us realize our potential and basically live a really fulfilled life, one where we can be at our best. And obviously we can't have that all the time, but often there's things that get in the way. And I spent 10 years working in the talent space, the assessment space, which was really around how do you realize potential of people, and worked with all kinds of organizations. And it was that actual very passion that I was so engaged and saw purpose in what I did, that I would say actually eventually then led to me getting into this kind of spiral of what basically ended up being burnout. So I loved my job. It wasn't that I hated my job. I loved the people that I worked with. I was passionate about my space, but just gradually over time, burnout crept into my life, and I'll talk more about exactly what that is. But the bit that I found really ironic is I'd done my dissertation when I did my MSc back in the day on burnout. So I had all of this knowledge. I knew what it was. I'd studied it and knew what it was. So despite our best knowledge of this topic, or even ourselves, you can get caught out. So just as a quick summary around what is burnout? Burnout is basically a state of exhaustion. It's a state where you, over time, get to a sense that you just have no energy left. A weekend, a good night's sleep, even a holiday, it doesn't really get you back to your fully kind of charged self, but where you feel creative and where you feel like fulfilled and aligned in yourself. So mental exhaustion is one, constant fatigue. I call it the doom loop, where you are working and busy and frenetically trying to get stuff done, or whatever it is that's kind of happening. You end up in this spiral. And so the first bit's exhaustion. The second bit is this low sense of accomplishment, like everything you're doing is not quite enough. And then the third one is cynicism, which is where you end up feeling really negative, and it's it gets to the point where, from a brain perspective, from a psychology side of things, the stress response that is normally really healthy and helps us all do, brilliant things, to jump into action, to perform, basically gets to the point where it's overworked, and you start to disconnect and disassociate from things that are happening around you, because in essence, your ability to cope with your demands gets diminished. So burnout develops where basically you're unable to cope with the level of demands that you're under. It's not that necessarily you can't do your job. It's not necessarily that you haven't got capability or talent. It's literally there's too many demands in your day that are exhausting your capacity, whether it's emotional, it can be physical, it's mental, all of it exhausts you. So long story short, I just got to the point where I knew that I wasn't okay. I wasn't sleeping. I remember a Christmas party, and someone just said, "How are you?" And I just burst out crying. Sounds dramatic, but it got to that point. Colleagues started to notice that I was normally a very calm person, and I was getting very emotional and reactive. And I look back around, well, why did that happen? You think, well, of course, it makes sense what happened. Long hours. I was doing 12-hour days. I was commuting from Bristol to London, 3 or 4 times a week. I was starting my day at 7:30 with back-to-back meetings. It was just an endless array of busyness, but not just busyness. It was a bunch of other things that sat around that were changed uncertainty. So I went through that experience, and I'm very happy to answer any questions and to go a bit more into that. But it took me a long while to get over that and to feel back to myself. And that's the common story, is and I've interviewed lots of people who have been through burnout, and everyone's got stuff at home or stuff at work or different things that happen, but it's often really hidden. And that was what inspired me personally. It wasn't just my experience. I was then looked around, and so many people I knew were also struggling. People were having panic attacks who I knew, but it wasn't talked about openly at work. It was just something that they got on with and dealt with in the background. And a lot of it is very preventable. When we talk about our mental health, yes, we can have the kind of illness side, which is something you might live with for, throughout your life. But we all have mental health, and when we don't look after it, or we push ourselves past our limits for too long, we can end up in this place that we don't want to be, and it impacts everything, and it takes time to recover. And from a workplace perspective, there was just, there's still stigma. There were people around me who, would look at other people's stress, and it'd be, oh, it's a performance problem. And it wasn't. It was, this person is working 12, 14 hours a day. So I'm kind of waffling on a bit around this, but there's a story around it. But also, for me, with why this is so important, is our modern life today is so fast-paced. Technology means we're always on. I always say there's so much innovation. We're probably going to hear about it all this week, about just the incredible things that are happening and the amount of growth and opportunity. And for founders, I think, and startup community, where you're trying to grow, you're trying to push to your limits, you're trying to realize that potential, and you've got that vision, there's a lot of alignment from some of my own story personally to how it comes into, the kind of work life. It all just you have to balance it to the point where you're not burning out, because if you're burning out as a leader or, someone in this space, it impacts everyone. You're also responsible for the culture that you're creating, and you can be burning your people out. And once they get to that point, it's very difficult to just switch back. It takes time, and people end up leaving. The cost of poor mental health within the workplace, it's something like $1 trillion globally, due to anxiety and depression and stress-related absence, presenteeism. It's a whole entanglement, but it's often hidden because of the stigma. It's hidden, and you don't see it, and it's very costly to business. It's very costly to people, and to, for what's going on. And now with the pandemic, obviously, there's much more conversation around it, which is fantastic. But I'm really interested just to hear, just to talk about, it could be my story more. It could be just the, things to think about if you're a founder and a leader. It's very close to my heart, obviously, because I've been through something, but it's also something that just needs to be addressed. And ultimately, that's why I started People Matter, is to basically apply technology and take a very data-led approach to how we can better understand predictors of burnout and measure and improve mental well-being at work. And obviously there's a huge amount of psychology to that. So it's not just about the emotions of it. Your environment, the people around you, the dynamics, your personality, it all impacts your mental health and whether you're likely to be burning out, or on the flip side, what's the psychology of being at your best, which was kind of the idea of this, is, there's psychology on both sides, really. So there's a lot in that, basically, that we can talk about in terms of why it's important, why we're here today, what you can think about for yourself. And that might be the final thing I'd say, and why it's important is I wasn't a founder when I burnt out, but I am now 3.5 years into People Matter. And we're growing and we raise money, and we've got some brilliant work that we're doing, but it's really hard. I have to keep myself in check all the time to not overdo it, or if I have done that, I give myself the rest breaks, because if I don't, I will be the kind of person who will burn out again, because I do work I care about and I'm passionate about it. But you can also burn out and not be passionate about your work. There's lots of reasons. So there's a lot in there, but hopefully that makes sense to everyone.
Yeah, Amy, thanks. We have been vocal about the issue. We have talked about depression, burnout, these kind of things in the past, but we haven't talked enough about it. That's why we made it such a big part of our agenda this whole week. There are, I don't know, 5-6 sessions just on mental health in this Raise Yourself track. It's very important to us. It's very dear to us. Why do you think that not enough people talk about it in general? So what is the stigma? What is the issue with it?
So I think there's a few things. I think if I pick on burnout for a minute, just because I think that one's quite a specific thing, I think part of it initially is there is not necessarily enough understanding and education around the difference between stress, which is you're under pressure, you're feeling stressed, you feel anxious from a busy day, you've got lots of deadlines or things that you're trying to get done, versus burnout, which is much more significant. It's that level of disconnect from the world. It's the sense of total exhaustion, like I said, not feeling good enough. It's getting to the point where you're going through the motions and you're trying to get everything done, but nothing's really ever getting to where you need it to, and you're exhausting yourself more because you've then not got enough energy in the tank, which makes it harder, which then means you make more mistakes, you start to drop it. So it's part of it, I think, is with it not being talked about, is actually when you're going through that yourself, you don't necessarily really properly take stock of how it's developed or how much there's a pattern or how bad it's really got, and you just try and get through it. I just get to this point. That's the way that I was all the time. I was like, I just need to get here. And my other half would, it got to the point where he was like, you can't keep doing this, where you just work to the holiday break and then it'd take 2 days to recover. Then I might eventually start to feel a bit better, but then it just start again as a cycle. So I think part of it is, do we really know? Is it, it's really hard to kind of put your finger on it sometimes if you're going through it.
So it's not necessarily a stigma, but it might very well be that you are not even aware of it yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
So what are the early warning signs that? And you were talked what it is, but let's talk about before I'm in this doom spiral, I think you called it. What are the early warning signs, and let's get very practical now here. What can a founder or just any person do to be aware quicker, and what should this person do then?
Yeah, so I think one way to think about it, just broadly, like we've all got energy every day that we're trying to harness and use. And if you imagine a bucket of water full of energy, that's your energy. That's you using up energy. So every kind of drop of stress into the bucket is taking up more energy, taking up more space in your bucket of what you can do. And you don't want the bucket to overflow, because it's too much. It's knocking over. So we're managing our energy every day. And, if you're pushing yourself to the point, if this is from a work perspective, and you're finishing your day and you've got nothing left in the tank, and maybe it might be you become more irritable. It might be you start to react more quickly to things that you wouldn't. It might be like, one of the things for me is I remember once going to a meeting and I met someone who offered a different perspective was much more visionary, and I realized how disconnected I was actually with the things that I cared about, and that I wasn't feeling creative. I didn't feel like I could think creatively in the way that I used to, and every single thing felt like a big problem. Like even just getting a WhatsApp message, or at the end of the day, lots of notifications. There would be a lot of things that you're trying to get done. So if you're noticing in yourself, just every little thing is becoming a thing, and everything feels like it takes energy and it's draining and it's dragging you to the point where that bucket's filled up and it's knocking over. You've got nothing left for anyone else. You're just consumed by the demands. That's one thing. So just notice that irritability piece. But the other thing is you notice your thought patterns. So what is the narrative in your head? And are you beating yourself up every day? So you've done everything you can, you're doing your best, but then you're beating yourself up saying, that wasn't good enough, I should have done this, I should have done that. And that was my wake-up call partly. As I remember being on a bus, I'd done a ridiculous day, and I was on a bus thinking, I should have done this, I should have done that. And I realized my whole thought process was so negative, and that started to play out. So that's another thing to look out for. I felt that every day was impossible. So I think that's the idea of your demands exceed your ability to cope. So if you're waking up every day or every week and you don't notice it at first, but you start to get this sense of you're taking a deep breath, you're just trying to push through it, that's another sign. Obviously, the more you deplete your energy, the more you might self-medicate, you might drink, you might start to pick up bad habits, and you just stop. You don't look after yourself in the same way, and they can seem really small things. And sleep is a big one. So if you're not getting enough sleep, it sounds so obvious, but sleep is a restorative activity for your brain. You literally need it to function, and if you're pushing yourself to the point where you're only getting a few hours and not 7 to 8. That's going to impact your ability to think and concentrate. So there's just a few examples, like mood, irritability, your self-talk, feeling exhausted, like at the end of the day, you've got nothing left, not feeling creative, feeling that all the little things are becoming big things. All of those are signs of burnout. But the three big ones, like I said, is exhaustion. It's the cynicism and negativity, like you start to feel negative about everything. And it's a sense of low accomplishment, like despite everything you're doing, you just don't feel that it's good enough, or you're not ever getting to where you need to. So
Amy,
yeah,
thanks so
and
much.
it can.
There are questions pouring in. I want to address a few. Just what an important talk. That's not a question, but that's just a remark. I think many are facing mental health problems, especially after the pandemic.
Yeah.
Then there is a very specific question here. As a leader, what can we do to prevent our team members from burning out?
Yeah, that's a very important question. So there's a number of things, and some of them they sound really obvious, and some of them is an everyday practice actually. 'Cause we haven't really, in my view, learnt how to manage everyday demands in the way that we are so distracted, interrupted all the time. Like I said, technology is always there. There are so many addictive things that draw us in, whether it's work, our phones, all of it. So actually, part of being a leader, to be honest, is initially checking yourself, like how are you working, how are you operating, are you role modeling yourself healthy behaviors, and that might be things like your own working hours. Are you sending emails at odd times that say urgent when perhaps it could wait till tomorrow? What sort of language are you using? If you're being very you can be challenging, but if you're putting people on the spot in front of other people a lot, or you're calling things out and making people feel threatened and unsafe psychologically, like things are good or bad rather than things that you can learn from, that creates stress. So your own language, are you creating a safe environment where people can speak up if they have an issue? Your own behavior, are you setting the healthy boundaries and saying, no, it's okay, I'm finishing at 4 today because I'm prioritizing whatever it is for your personal life, depending on your working culture and what rules you have. It's okay to have an hour's lunch break. This is what I did for my lunch break, or to encourage and give permission to other people. And this is a really common one. I was talking to a client the other day where they've got some transitioning opening with offices opening again, and no one is being made to go back to the office. No, and that's an anxiety at the moment in itself. But we all make assumptions around what the business is expecting of us, and therefore your teams will just be trying to work things out because they're looking at cues, they're looking at you, they're looking at what's really expected. So you have to make it very, very explicit around what is good and what is okay. It's good to take holiday, it's good to take time off. There's absolutely no way you have to be in the office, whatever it is. You absolutely can finish early, this, if you need to for something personal. There's lots of ways you can do it, but you have to make it very, very clear that this is important. You want a healthy culture, you're role modeling it, and that it's very explicit. Because the client example, whilst they hadn't said that people had to go to the office, everyone felt forced back to work into the office, and that wasn't the policy, but everyone is just making that assumption in some way. So that there's a few things just in that. I would say a big thing with burnout is, as a leader, you're setting the tone, but you also have things that you can influence which impact people in terms of their workload. So one of the biggest reasons, or one of the contributing factors of burnout, is too much work, not having enough time, so unreasonable deadlines, lots of competing demands where they're trying to work out, do I focus here or do I focus there? And there's lots of different things, and it creates overwhelm. Change and uncertainty does that too. So just a simple kind of exercise I tend to do with people is, if you imagine, if you were to write down all the pressures that you think your team are under at the moment, like where are they at, what are they feeling, what are they finding difficult, and if you were to give it a score of 10 being healthy, like good healthy pressure, and 0 is like really, everyone's overwhelmed with all the things I've just said, where would you put them? And then the next question isn't just how difficult is it, and therefore what could you change to make the pressures more manageable? Do you adjust workload, for instance, and look at what's realistic, or take something off someone's plate? And that is obviously a big thing, but the bit that really buffers and protects people, or helps people get through difficulty, are the positive psychology things. So that's a whole other thing. So what are the things helping your people? Positive relationships. Is it a healthy, positive relation, like the working environment relationships? Is there good support? Do people have control to make decisions of their time, their work, times of day, of how they do things, or is everything coming at them? And feeling that there's that opportunity to find meaning in their day. And all of those things you can help create and provide within your environment. So again, is it really healthy in your team at the moment as a 10? Or is it really lacking? Is there a lack of that because you're not giving people time? Has it become transactional? And you can then basically, if you imagine an axis like this, I don't know if you can see this very well, and a 10-10 is really healthy, and then a 1, a 0-0 or 1-1 is really unhealthy. It's the opposite. If you're in that bottom zone, that's where your people are at the greatest risk of burnout. So you can affect it by basically relieving some of the pressure, or finding ways to kind of review it with someone in some shape or form. Or it's about supporting people and making people feel they are in a healthy environment where they can speak up, where they can ask for help, where they have more control in their day. So that's all in conversation, it's all in things that you do, and that will help move it up again. So there's lots that you can do, but equally it's difficult because you're up against it yourself all the time. And you have to create space for it. You have to speak to people and give time and openness, and rather than just saying people, what are you up to and what do you think about this, you've got to create more space around, how are you really feeling about things at the moment? Like, use different words. Like, how do you feel about this particular project at the moment? And, you know, you can say, I know it's really intense. You know, is it too much? Like, you have to be really explicit and ask the right questions, but just open it. Don't say, close it when they say, yeah, I'm fine. Just open it and say, well, how are you managing it with your workload? So there's a lot in there, I know I've just said, but you have to basically role model and think about how you're setting boundaries. And a few examples I've given there. You have to think about what's realistic for your team, like with that axis that I said. And you have to create space for people to be able to share if they're really struggling, and then see what you can do about it. You know, build up that sense of support. That's part of it, basically. But yeah, great question.
Yeah, and there are more questions in here. Maybe you can take a look later. We have something like 2 minutes left. Just a quick. If I feel myself I'm close to a burnout, or I have already burned out, or if I see employees burning out, what specifically can be done? Not in terms of change something, but where can I get help? What would you advise? Take a week off or something else?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. First is, if you're at the point that you know you're burnt out, you have to take it seriously. You absolutely do, whether you're a leader or an individual. You have to give yourself that extra time, like give yourself more time off. Absolutely is a first step. If you're really, really struggling yourself, you can go to the doctors, and you can obviously take time off from work. And many people who I've spoken to have had to do that because it got to the point that they didn't have a choice. But hopefully you don't get to that point. There's lots of professional services out there. Clearly, the sooner that you act on it and you see these patterns, the better. Because if you leave it to that point, there's lots. It can link into depression. It can link into anxiety, and it can take over. So if you're starting to think, I'm worried about myself, I would say, first of all, give yourself a break. Focus on the simple things like looking after yourself, sleep, time off, set boundaries. Don't do a to-do list, do a not to-do list. That's literally all you do. So look at your week and say, what is realistic for me this week to do? Or what needs to change for this to be a good week? And actually commit to that to yourself, that you're going to make some changes. You're going to say no more. You're going to push things back. You're going to make some sort of change. So you have to take that seriously. And you have to see what your own patterns are as well. It's not just the boundaries. You've got to look at, if I just take a break, great, you might come back feeling better. But if everything's still the same in how you operate and nothing's changed, you're going to get burnt out again. So it could be the pressures. It could be the type of job. So I actually changed my job because I realized I hated it and basically managed to form a new role that suited my strengths and what I was about. So really ask yourself the questions: what's really contributing it? Is it a bad relationship? Is it too much going on? Is it the change? Is it the job? You know, whatever it is, ask yourself those questions, and educate yourself as much as you can. It's different for everyone.
Wonderful.
But I know we don't have long, so
Amy,
that would be my immediate.
Thanks so much. We're out of time, unfortunately. So there are a few questions still left. Maybe if you have the time, stick around quickly, go to the networking table area, to the Raise Yourself table. And also, if you want to ask Amy further questions, go there. Peoplematter.com, right? That's where people should go. Sorry?
Yeah.
.tech. Sorry, peoplematter.tech. I'm sorry. Peoplematter.tech. Absolutely, yes. Go there. You'll also find Amy on social media, on LinkedIn, for example, and also on this platform. Amy, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing all these valuable insights. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I will see you in the networking bit. Cheers.
Cheers.